Longer, where the city hosted a Kwanzaa observance at City Hall yesterday. Kwanzaa is observed the last week of December and celebrates African heritage. Holyoke's observance included a candle lighting ceremony, remarks by Professor H. Zahar Caldwell, an educator and cultural historian at Westfield State University, and the reading of a proclamation by Holyoke Mayor Joshua Garcia designating December 26th through January 1st Kwanzaa week in Holyoke. We spoke with Mayor Garcia, who told us more about what Kwanzaa means to the city.
Holyoke, we're a community of migrants and immigrants. We're vastly different in every corner of our city, and any opportunity I can to celebrate culture is what Holyoke stands for.
We also spoke with Ayanna Crawford and Teresa Cooper Gordon, who talked more about the 7 principles of Kwanzaa.
The 7 principles are the basis of Kwanzaa, which is the Nguzo Saba, and these principles should be shared throughout the year, 365 days. And so I practice the principles of Kwanzaa in my daily living with my children and with my family.
I feel like if the community celebrated those 7 principles each day, every week, start all over again, our communities will be a lot more healthier and a lot more unity, a lot more faith in each other.
How great is that? All right.